They thought the German Shepherd was making it worse. He wasn't. He was the only one who knew what was actually happening. The sound of a 30-pound toddler hitting the floor is unmistakable. A hollow thud followed by a half-second of silence, and then the scream that takes your whole body and squeezes it from the inside. Marcus hit the living room floor on a Tuesday afternoon. He was 16 months old, blue shirt, bare feet. He'd been crying for 22 minutes before that, and every time the crying reached a new pitch, Sergeant moved closer. That was the problem. That was what Delia couldn't make sense of. The German Shepherd, 84 pounds, 4 years old, had spent 16 months being exactly what she'd hoped for. Patient, measured. He'd let Marcus pull his ears without flinching. He'd moved around the baby with the kind of deliberate awareness she'd come to depend on. He knew where the baby was at all times. He always had. Which made what was happening now feel like a line had been crossed. Every time Marcus cried, Sergeant pressed closer, nose to the boy's face. Hovering, staying, Delia would redirect him. Sergeant would return. She redirected him again. He circled the boy and lowered his head directly over Marcus's face and held it there. Delia was a licensed clinical social worker. She worked with at-risk families. She had sat in rooms where people described this exact pattern. A dog fixating on a distressed child, escalating proximity, refusing to disengage. She had written reports about it. She had referred families to animal behaviorists. She knew, from her professional framework, what this was. She was wrong about all of it. Her husband, Tom, came home to find Sergeant in the hallway, blocked by a baby gate Delia had installed at the living room entrance. The dog was sitting against it with his full weight, pressing forward, eyes fixed through the slats at Marcus on the floor. Marcus had stopped crying. He was quiet. Tom thought that was the good sign. It wasn't. Sergeant, go lie down, Tom said it twice. The dog turned, looked at him flatly, and turned back to the gate. Tom called his brother, who had a property outside the city. We just need a few days, Tom said, until we figure out what's happening with him. The decision felt responsible. It felt like the right call. Delia agreed without hesitation. She had professional certainty behind her, and professional certainty is a heavier weight than doubt. The car was loaded. Sergeant's bed, his bowls, his collar on the hook by the door. Tom's brother said he'd meet them at the gate. Delia went to get Marcus, who was on the blanket in the living room. Still quiet. Too quiet. She picked him up, and the limpness stopped her mid-motion. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. His body wasn't responding the way it should. She turned his face toward her. His eyes were half closed. His lips had a color she recognized from clinical training, not from home. She took his temperature. It read 104.1. She called 911 before the thermometer finished beeping. At the pediatric emergency unit, Dr. Nadia Reeves, 12 years in emergency pediatrics at Claremont Regional, sat across from them, 40 minutes after they arrived. Marcus had been in the early onset of a febrile seizure. His temperature had been climbing for hours. The quiet that followed his crying wasn't calm. It was the neurological suppression that comes before a serious event. He was between two thresholds when Delia found him. She looked at them. Another 35 minutes and we would be managing active seizure. With a child this age in that heat window, that becomes a hospitalization with monitoring for neurological impact. You caught it very close to the line. Tom said. We didn't catch it. He couldn't finish the sentence. The veterinary behaviorist they contacted 3 days later was Dr. Alinta Walsh, Canine Olfactory and Behavior Research, Mawson Institute. She asked them to describe Sergeant's behavior in sequence. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, he was reading the fever. Body temperature elevation in a febrile child produces a specific thermal and chemical signature. Dogs can detect elevated core temperature through proximity to exhaled breath and skin. The pattern you're describing, sustained close contact, nose to the face, refusal to disengage, that is the detection behavior. He wasn't agitating Marcus. He was staying close because he was registering a biological emergency that nothing else in your house could detect. Has your dog ever done something that made no sense until it was the only thing that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. The gate came down the next morning. Sergeant came through the door without drama. He walked to where Marcus was sitting in his bouncy chair and lowered his head and exhaled once, long and slow, into the boy's hair. Marcus grabbed his ear with both hands. Sergeant held still. Delia sat on the floor beside them and didn't say anything. She had been trained to read situations. She had frameworks and reports and 11 years of professional judgment. Sergeant had one thing she didn't. He had stayed in the room when everything in his experience told him something was wrong, and he'd refused to leave until someone understood why. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never asked for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. What happened next with this family and the medical discovery that came 3 weeks later is a story we'll share soon. Some of the things Sargent was detecting didn't end that Tuesday afternoon. The follow-up appointment confirmed what Sargent had been doing for days before anyone understood it. Marcus was discharged with a referral to a pediatric specialist and a course of treatment. Delia drove home with the dog's head resting on her arm from the back seat. The whole way, she didn't move her arm for the entire 40-minute drive. That was the least she could do.